Have a blessed day, everyone. So I am Marishing Fuentes, and I am your reporter for this day. And we are the Group 5, and our topic is all about the women in the Philippines. So before anything else, I would like to show you the learning outcomes that we have. So at the end of this chapter, the students should be able to first describe how the role of Filipino women in society evolved. Next, state at least three kinds of responses of Filipino women to oppression. And lastly, explain how oppression emerged in the Philippines history. So my first topic is all about the women in pre-colonial Philippines. So the history of women in our society should be examined in order to understand the unique situation of women in the Philippines. The Philippine situation is unique as it is rooted in the colonial history of the country. The actual condition of pre-Spanish women in the Philippines can be reflected from the practices of the indigenous peoples and the testimonies of Spanish chronicles. These sources indicate that there was a genuine measure of equality among men and women during the pre-Spanish period. Prior to Hispanic colonization, there was no discrimination between sons and daughters. Parents took pride of their children equally, and male and female children were educated equally and took an active role in society. At the start of Spanish contact, a majority of natives could write using their own orthography, and sex education was prescribed as a duty of a mother to her daughter as stated at least in the Code of Kalanchao. Marriages were arranged with a dowry paid by the groom to the wife's family, and women ran the household and took part in the negotiation of contracts. Divorce was available to vote, and vote had equal rights to property and children. Women played an important role in the economic life of the people, including planting and harvesting, weaving, making pottery, and trading. They also fought alongside men in battle. According to the historian Louis Derry, also many women became either as direct rulers, caretakers for the young datu, or just as influential people who could build alliances or negotiate the outcomes of battle. Ida Santos Marilyn's notes on the women's movement in the Philippines highlighted the equality of women in pre-Hispanic economy and the lack of a centralized system of production. Women had no social basis for existing, but the concept of private property had started to take roots in some communities, leading to class structure germinating and women becoming part of social and productive relations. Moreland highlights an important part for the equality of women. Women were independent because they had equal access and control of production resources. It was not until the conquest of the Spanish colonizers that women had been subsumed into another class. Historian Estelle Predman notes that there is some measure of equality in society when women are involved in the production of food. Sociologist Fe Mangajas expresses this as the archipelago could provide a variety of food throughout the year with people fishing, gathering, and planting on the land during dry season, and children and women, even when pregnant, able to participate production was not required extractive or slave labor. Before colonialism, women were leaders in the community. Women's oppression and equality developed in colonial times due to the production of surplus and accumulation of wealth, leading to class and hierarchy. Alongside the dato or the chieftain and panday or the smith, a babaylan held a central place in society. During pre-colonial times, the babaylan was a woman or a man who took on the persona of a woman, said to be chosen by the spirit and given special powers to engage the unseen beings of nature. Babaylan were healers. Essentially to the functioning of pre-Hispanic society, the Babaylan helped people understand their cosmic order to navigate reality meaningfully. If someone suffered a misfortune, the Babaylan would help him or her overcome or even prevent future misfortunes. This way, the Babaylan served and lead the community. A Babaylan was a culture bearer, priest, and meat keeper, healing not only one's body and soul but also one's relationship with the spirits and nature. The Babaylan was dependent on to maintain the community's well-being. Babaylans fought to maintain their traditional beliefs and convert to a new religion, preventing the relocation and reorganization of communities. Babaylan women led rebellions between 1596 and 1780, inspiring legends like first we have the Pungay in Visayas in 1599, next we have Kawinga in Cagayan Valley in 1607, and third, we have Iga in Nueva Ecija in 1649. And lastly, we have Santissima in Iloilo in 1664. Rebellions were acts of defiance against Spanish systems and kept the old culture alive. The Babaylan could organize resistance by persuading their communities to destroy their crops, kill their livestock, and evacuate to the mountains to deprive the Spaniards of these supplies. However, eventually the Babaylans were attacked in their mountain hideouts through native informants. After these unfortunate events, the Babaylan's power waned and the Spanish brand of Catholicism colonized the people. Today, the Babaylan still exists in the Philippine society. Mga has notes that the Babaylan culture itself integrated into the Christian culture in order to survive. The Babaylans could have created an interspace between Christianity and animism. So the Babaylan could creatively resist and survive. Whatever happened to the Babaylan in the past, it is clear that they survived to this very day in various cultures of the Philippines. Lastly, a landmark study by ethnomusicologist Grace Nono illustrates that the Babaylan tradition is alive in the Philippines. The Babaylan tradition still shapes the worldviews of many traditional communities in the Philippines. Babaylans are women who combine Christian and Islamic worldviews to create an ordered world. In other words, these traditional women leaders still serve their communities as they did in ancient times. They have taken on different aspects of various communities and have learned to adapt the westernized Philippine culture. In sum, women were important in the Philippine society and were generally equal with men in their old worldview, one that did not curtail freedom or construct women as unequal. It was with the coming of Spanish colonialism that the Filipina was constructed differently. My next topic is all about the women in the Hispanic period. Spanish priors used their influence in traditional communities to spread their religion, suppressing women in order to avoid Palocentric religions. Also, the Spaniards wanted Filipino women to be subjugated to their husbands and to the Catholic Church. To remold women into the alien notion of an ideal woman, they were taught to avoid sin by being chaste, modest, and self sacrificing. Colonizers created a woman who was only active at home and withdrawn from the public sphere. Filipino women were reduced to instrument for propagating the colonial system and producing the next generation that would ensure its survival. Chastity, purity, and forbearance were thus promoted simply to subdue the early Filipina to her new role and constrict her creative participation in the society. This kind of woman was ironically portrayed by Rizal through the character of Maria Clara, who was sweet, docile, obedient, self-sacrificing, and who never had the courage to share the fate of her beloved. She was forced into an engagement with a Spaniard, chose to enter the convent to flee from a loveless marriage, and made a more permanent escape from the vicissitudes of life into insanity. Also, Filipinas were victims of the Spaniards' patriarchal system and its power relations, which limited their participation in public life. Women were limited to supporting roles such as status display and maintenance. Women sought refuge on the church, cultivating an infinite capacity in forbearance, suffering, and forgiveness. Propaganda movements criticized the role of women in society, and Isabella de los Reyes urged the U.S. to take away decorative knowledge and instead demand from teachers elements of medicine,
domestic pharmacy, and agricultural knowledge.
The propaganda movement, however, began to recognize the crucial roles women could assume, especially in campaigns against Spain. Although still limited, while the propaganda movement itself was very male enterprise, it sought to raise the status of women. Women participation in uprising by the Katipunan.
Lastly, women can still fight for Philippine liberation despite centuries of misogyny. Women enlisted in Emilius Aguinaldo's army to fight against the American regime. Agueda Iniquinto Kahabagan even rose to the rank of General Brigada in 1899 and led his military unit under Aguinaldo's army. Other women have also on similar positions within the Katipunan. Other historical facts indicate that women during the Spanish era were key actors in the Philippine Revolution, and yet their exploits are not widely recognized.
Good day, everyone. I am Maylin Scarda, and for continuation of our work, let's talk about the women in American era. From the 19th and 1920s, most women groups furthered the presence of women in the public sphere by focusing on the charity work and social services. This group were formed to be keep the elite women busy working with orphans and assisting prisoners. Ida Marana documented the development of various women associations and leagues during American period in the Philippines. Marana observed that a women group at this time were bearers and implementers of social reforms within institutions initially established by men. Decision making at the top level of these movements had largely been done by men, while certain women associations or groups campaigned for their voice to be heard and rules given definitions. The attempt had to be made by substantial impact of exploitation of women through the class of gender. So next is the development women groups in the Philippines. In 1899, notable event Association de Damas de la Cruz Roja or the Women Red Cross Associations was formed to help in the Philippines war effort. And in 1902, the Liga Femenina de la Paz or Philippines Women League of the Peace was set up assist in the U.S. pacification of the Philippine Island. And 1905, the Association Feminist Filipina, an organization gathered in volunteers to reform the Philippine society, was created. And in 1906, the Association Feminist Ilongga was created. It fought for women's suffrage. In 1907, the La Gota Leche was formed to assist the women maternal and infant care. In 1909, a magazine devoted to the women's issue came out to foster the struggle for women's rights and improvements. In 1909, the first women club called the Society for the Advancement of Women was founded. In 1921 and 1937, the Philippines saw its own suffragette movements. And in 1922, the Liga Nacional de Mas Filipina, the National League of Filipino Women, was organized with the aim Philippines' independence and better working conditions for factory women. And in 1928, the suffragette movement was enhanced with the creation of Women's Citizen League. And in 1929, the first Women Convention was organized by the Philippines Women Suffragette Women, wherein the suffrage rights of women was agreed on. The fight for maternity leave with a pay was also brought to the table. And in 1935, the Act number 2711 granted women the right to vote. This is the creation of General Council of Women to make sure this right will be exerted by 1937. And in 1937, Filipino women realized their right to vote. 1939, the League of Women's Voters organized for voters' education. And in 1950, women organized Civic Assembly of the Philippines engaged policy making but reinforced the belief that the primary concern of women was hope. In 1951, the first national political party of women was set up but did not last because of the dominance of established parties. So we have the three insights about women's movements from the American period until the martial law, activism, and relevance. Firstly, these movements were began and dominated by men. Secondly, that the women involved these movements gave the liberty rules that were traditionally denied them. And thirdly, the goals of the objectives these movements were valued towards important smaller or greater section of Filipino women. Since that period progressively as of US-style democracy and semi-colonial status were legitimized, and the women's organization have taken the patriarchally design to enhance the status quo, posing moral guardians of society, promoting useless reforms, glorifying the charity works, drumming up the support for the political and other causes of the ruling elite, the reinforcing and the rule women was as wife and homemaker and auxiliary to men. So next, women in the American era. Women groups during the American period further interested of ruling classes as were these countries. These groups needed the Philippines in strategic in the military location Asia, cheap labor, natural resources. Immersing with the marginalized people keep women groups so busy they felt they involved the society and had no time to question their subordinate and grueling men. Worker wage keep the law and act oppressive government preventing workers from earning decent income would allow them to be housed and their children to be educated and their notorious needs to be met. Displacement in the countrysides and trigger the land takeovers of or social and military arrests brought about the exploitation of natural resources by elite and foreign nationals. Women victims displacement suffer the double burden of providing their condition while providing their family. So next is the birth of militant groups with a feminist agenda. Revolutionary groups that emerged in the 1960s and the 1970s were associated with the communists and movements. This group argued the nation was suffering underdevelopments because its economy served the interests of US by providing cheap labor and free access to resources, as well by serving the dumping ground for US goods. The new economic model under the American and post-war period brought about various levels of poverty. Women who work with the underground and above-ground components of the Communist Party and other socialist groups that revealed it and realized that the agenda for liberations could also serve women's quest and equality. Many of the problems women faced were a result of stiff structure that kept them poor exposed to various kinds of exploitations. This the nationalities of militant women movement, as they called themselves, believed that the only way to achieve the equality in the society was liberate the nation from the exploitation of elite and the US. So next, the iconic Malayang kilusan ng bagong kababaihan. Makibaka. The radical women's group led by student activists showed that the root of women's problem lay in the feudalism, capitalism, and colonialism. They also asserted that the role of women in the liberation movement should not be confined to making sandwiches and raising funds, jotting down the minutes of the meeting, and playing adjuncts to the male leaders who generally made the decision. Eventually, they took the organizing and education women peasants and laborers as well the establishment maker centers for the latter. with its importance for freeing women engaged in the public sphere. Makibaka became the inactive because leaders were imprisoned, underdriven, and hiding during martial law. This organization is an important part of the history. It is first group and it emphasized the issue of women's as integral and yet distinct from the general national liberalization objective of the party. Next is the kilusan ng kababaihang Pilipina and the Katipunan ng Kababaihan para sa Kalayaan, were groups formed in 1980s. The challenge of the potential anti-women's ways of communists and the party's leadership. The assassination of Benigno Aquino Jr., the main opponent of former President turned dictator Ferdinand Marcos, brought the women's group into the limelight and they pushed their own political agenda. These organizations were led by the middle and upper class political inclined matrons who sought for the justice, freedom, democracy through the peaceful means. A prominent group in the National Organization of Women, which was adjunct of the United Democratic Opposition Party in cold sessions. During this time, the identifying called the consultation in the Hannes governance resulted in the foundation of the other women groups like Alliance of Women for Action Toward the Regularizations and the Women for the Auster and Marcos and Bayot. Women's in section also sprung from the existing group like Concerned Artists of the Philippines. Religious women came together in alliance as well, like Association of Women's Theology, which brought together pastor, Catholic nuns, and deacons. And the Kapinsanan ng mga Madres sa Maynila, which was composed of religious women. And the Church Women United, which was affiliated with the National Council of Churches in the Philippines. And also the students from universities. Likewise, established groups like the University of Philippines Samahang Makabayan ng Kababataang Kababaihan, Samaka Kababaihan, exclusive school formed in their own group as well like Ateneo de Manila, Estinio Women, and the Men Mary Cole College Katipunero. This is the Akbayan adopted of women's agenda alongside its other issues. These parties brought to the public eye the discourse of women issue and made policy-making response to these needs in its own in two terms as party list representative Abansa. Pinay was able to push for the passage of Sole Parents Welfare Act 2000, the Anti-Trafficking Person Act 2003, and the Anti-Violence Against Women and Their Children Act 2004. Akbayan supported reproductive health law, Mag-McCarthy Women, and the Gender Balance Bill, among the others bills law. And that's all for my parts. Thank you.
Leticia Ramos Shahani. She was a former senator, chair of the National Commission on the Role of Filipino Women, and UN Assistant Secretary General for Social Development and Humanitarian Affairs. She is the one of the women who spearheaded and solely drafted Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, during the height of the international recognition on women's human rights in 1967. Shahani passed the Foreign Service exam and worked for the Department of Foreign Affairs. She later became the representative of the country to the first international conference on the status of women in Mexico in 1975. She did this while establishing a local mechanism in the Philippines to advance the cause of women. After the Mexican conference, Shahani and other Filipino women leaders, Helena Benitez, Cecilia Munoz Palma, and of the Filipino women in 1975, in 1987, she started her terms as Irene Cortez formed the National Commission on the Role of Philippine Senator under the first Aquino administration and served for 2 terms. She pioneered law intended to alleviate the plight of women. Patricia Benitez Licuanan. She served as the chairperson of the Commission on Higher Education, chairwoman of the National Commission on the Role of Filipino Women, chairperson of the Commission on the Status of Women, chairperson of the Main Committee for World Conference on Women, co-founder of the Asia Pacific Women's Watch, and convener of the Asia Pacific NGO Forum in Beijing. As graduate student of psychology, she focused her work on the problems of women, initially on the problems caused by migration. She was struck by the gender dimension and how different issues affect women more than men. Affect working for the United Nations, Lipuanan returned to the academy and served as the academic vice president of Ateneo de Manila University, and then moved on to become president of Miriam College. On her radical decision, during her term as president of Miriam College, was the restoration of the college into an all-women institution after experimenting with co-education for 15 years. As CHED chair, she continued to advocate gender equality in various educational institutions. Teresita Quintos Deles. She is a peace advocate, former chair and co-founder of Coalition for Peace, National Peace Conference, presidential advisor on the peace process during the time of former President Benigno Aquino III, and appointed lead convener on the National Anti-Poverty Commission from 2001 to 2003. She maintained an active involvement in the women's movement, particularly in the institution of Filipina, which is recognized as the first women organization in the Philippines and explicitly homegrown feminist line. She also represented a civil society in key governance partnership, including the Social Reform Council of the Ramos administration that laid the groundwork of four landmark reform policies, such as the Social to Expose Reform in Poverty Alleviation Act, Indigenous People Rights Act, and Anti-Rape Law, among others. Sister Mary John Manansan, OSB. She is a feminist activist, former Gabriela chairperson, former president of St. Scholastica's College, and prioress of the Missionary of Benedictine Sisters of the Manila Priory. Named as one of the top 100 inspiring people in the world during her time as director of the Institute of Women's Studies of St. Scholastica in 2011. She was cited for being instrumental in developing a feminist third world theology within the Catholic Church and introducing feminist activism. As a feminist activist, Sister Mary John led many women-centered programs and organizations such as the Women's Crisis Center and the Women's Ecology and Wellness Farm. She was also active in street parliament against the dictatorship during Marcos regime. Sister Christine Tan. She was the first Filipina to head the Philippine province of the Religious of Good Shepherd, a former chairperson and the executive board of Association of Major Religious Superiors of Women in the Philippines and founder of Alay Kapwa Christian Community. During the Marcos regime, she boldly issued a memorandum to all major superiors of religious men and women that they would continue publishing Signs of Times, despite telegrams from Chairman Hans Menzi of the Philippine Council for Print Media asking them to stop publish various reports. She was a member of the 1986 Constitutional Convention by an invitation from the President Corazon Aquino to give the urban poor a voice in the revision of the Constitution of the Philippines. She chose to live among the urban poor despite coming from a very wealthy family. Joy Barrios, born as Maria Josephine Barrios in 1962. She is a popular poet, actress, scriptwriter, and activist. She earned her PhD in Filipino and Philippine literature from the University of the Philippines and served as Associate Professor and Associate Dean of the UP College of Arts and Letters. Her works include a collection of poetry entitled To Be a Woman is to Live at a Time of War, published by Institute of Women's Studies in St. Scholastica's College in 1990. She was among the 100 women chosen as weavers of history for the Philippine Centennial Celebration, an awardee of the 10 Outstanding Women in Nation Service, TONS, in 2004. Barrios teaches Filipino and Philippine literature at the Department of South and Southeast Asian Studies and Asian American Program of the University of California. Lorena Barros. Maria Lorena Barros was a woman leader, gifted writer, and one of the icons of the modern Philippine feminism. She was one of the well-known heroes during the anti-dictatorship struggle who founded the Malayang Kilsa ng Bagong Kababaihan or Maki-Baka. In 1970, she graduated from the University of the Philippines with a degree in anthropology and taught while taking UP graduate courses in 1971. Barros was one of the 63 student leader charged with subversion. She went underground but was arrested in 1973, jailed at Camp Vicente Lim in Laguna, and then transferred to Fort Bonifacio's Ipil Rehabilitation Center, where she escaped a year later. She rejoined the underground movement and continued writing poems, songs, and essays there. In 1974, the Marcos government offered 35,000 for her capture. In 1976, Barros was seriously wounded and captured in an armed encounter in Mauban, Quezon. When asked for cooperation by her captors in exchange for medical treatment, she chose not to cooperate. She died at the age of 28. Raisa Jajuri. Attorney Jajuri is the Moral Program Coordinator of the Alternative Legal Assistance Center, an advocate of Muslim women's rights. She believes in justice for Muslim women in accordance with Islamic teachings and human rights standards. In her 10 years of work with Muslim women, she founded Nisa ul-Haq fi Bangsamoro, Women for Justice in the Bangsamoro, an organization for Muslim women that conducts trainings, community dialogues, researches, and policy advocacy. Recently, Attorney Jajuri was appointed to join the MILF Peace Panel in 2014. Rosel Amubuyog. She is the first visual impaired Filipina to be awarded summa cum laude. Blind at age of 6, Amubuyog did not let her disability hinder her to finish her studies. She graduated valedictorian in her elementary school and high school. She was awarded a full scholarship at the Ateneo de Manila University, where she later graduated with bachelor's degree in mathematics with all the possible awards for student excellence and service. Outside school, she received special awards and recognition, the 10 Outstanding Students of the Philippines, Order of the Knights of Rizal, and the Bank of the Philippine Islands Foundation Science Award. Ambubuyog also started a project in partnership with the Rotary Club of Makati Ayala, which donated computers, scanners, and braille technologies to different schools, giving opportunities to blind students. Rosa Hinson. Lola Rosa was a comfort woman in 1992. She broke the silence about Filipino comfort women through her autobiography, Comfort Women, Slave of Destiny during World War II. She joined the Hukbalahap and served as a messenger. She was forcibly taken by the Japanese forces and brought to a hospital in Angeles, Pampanga, where her ordeal as a comfort Japanese soldiers. After coming out with her story, she fought for women began at 14 of age. She was raped by scores of justice for comfort women by joining demonstrations and even filing a suit in Tokyo. She died in 1997 at the age of 69.
Good day everyone, I am Carl Vincent Araldan, and today I am reporting about the current forms of oppression against Filipino women and their responses. So according to Cynthia Nolasco, there are three major issues that Filipino women face. These are called intersectional oppression. Intersectional oppression asserts that people are often disadvantaged by multiple sources of oppression. This may include their race, class, gender identity, sexual orientation, religion, and other identity markers. These are the oppressions that women face due to the marginalization of other parts of their identity. So these three major issues are the following. Women are oppressed due to their gender. This is because women are vulnerable and can easily be silenced and disregarded compared to men. Men are treated highly than women because the majority thinks that men are just better. Another, women are oppressed due to their membership or status in society. Women are given with minority roles in the society, just like farmers, domestic servants, or factory workers. Women are not given golden opportunities that may improve their lives or at least sustain their needs from a day-to-day basis. Most of these opportunities are handed to men as they are more adequate for the role and because they are the head of the family, and not to women because they are weak and cannot handle these types of jobs. And lastly, women are oppressed as citizens of a former colony due to exploitative oppression. Globalization has led to exploitation of labor, and because the Philippines is a third world country, most women and child workers are used to work in inhumane conditions. Safety standards are ignored to produce cheap goods. This is due to the fact that human trafficking is prevalent in the Philippines and prime targets are women and children. So, next topic is women in the third world. We all know that the Philippines is a third world country. Therefore, the country cannot properly function and implement their laws due to the corruption and poverty. Because of this, Filipinos are left to face reality and endure this flawed system. And in turn, the most affected sector of this discrepancy are women. So there are numerous forms of oppression against women because of their socialized gender role. Here are some instances that Filipino women experience. Violence against women. Examples are rape, domestic violence, gender discrimination, and harassment on work. Religious and ideological beliefs. Examples, perceptions or dogmas that women are in service for men and nothing more. Cheap labor force. Examples, women are paid less than men and the usual irregular workers or substitutes for workers for men. Lack of representation. Examples, women don't have a platform or governing body to freely voice out their concerns and opinions and prioritize their welfare. Positions as citizens for the third world. Examples, women are deprived from their rights and opportunities for women development. And last, flawed system. Example is the Philippine government's weak implementation and enforcement of laws that help protect and encourage repressed Filipino women. With all of the aforementioned discriminations against Filipino women, Philippine feminists have centered their engagements on these certain issues. Some groups are organized around the care for women victims that experience these oppressions. Some offer legal assistance, counseling, and a safe haven for the abused Filipino women. They work to change policies at either national or local events in response to their sector's needs. So, here are some Filipino women organizations that help Filipino women. Well, number one, Gabriela Philippines. Gabriela Philippines is a women's organization that advocates for women's rights and gender equality in the Philippines. They promote women's empowerment and violence against women and improve the living conditions for women and girls. They have become one of the most influential voices for women's rights in the Philippines. Gabriela Philippines is committed to working with marginalized women and girls, including indigenous women, workers' wives, and women living in poverty. Number 2, the Samahan ng mga Progresibong Kababaihan or SPARK. The Samahan ng mga Progresibong Kababaihan or SPARK mission is to promote gender equality and social justice. The organization provides training and education programs on gender and social justice issues, as well as legal assistance to women who have experienced violence or abuse. SPARK also advocates for policy reforms that improve the status of women in the Philippines. SPARK is committed to promoting gender equality and social justice for women in the Philippines and works to provide education and assistance to women who need it. And number 3, Women's Crisis Center or the WCC. Women's Crisis Center or the WCC is a women's organization in the Philippines that provides support to victims of violence. The center offers counseling and therapy services, as well as legal and financial assistance to women who have experienced violence. WCC also provides training and education programs on violence against women and advocates for policies that improve the safety of women in the Philippines. WCC believes that violence against women is a human rights violation and works to provide support and assistance to victims of violence. That's to conclude my report, and thank you.
Practical feminism in the Philippines. Practical feminism in the Philippines refers to efforts and action aimed to promoting gender equality and empowering women in everyday life. Here are some examples of practical feminism in the Philippines. First, women economic empowerment. One practical feminism approach in the Philippines is to promote women's economic empowerment through initiatives such as microfinance programs, livelihood projects, and entrepreneurship training. These initiatives aim to provide women with opportunity to become economically self-sufficient, reduce their dependence on men, and improvement their overall well-being. Second, gender-sensitive education. Another practical feminism approach in the Philippines is to promote gender-sensitive education. This includes integrative gender perspective into the curriculum, training teachers on gender issues, and creating safe and inclusive learning environments for all students. The goal to raise awareness of gender inequalities, challenge gender stereotypes, and promote gender equality. Third, women's health and productive rights. Practical feminism also involves advocating for women's health and reproductive rights. This includes providing access to productive health service and information, promoting gender-sensitive healthcare, and addressing the unique health needs of women, such as maternal health and productive cancers. Fourth, gender-based violence or GBV prevention. Practical feminism in the Philippines also involves addressing gender-based violence GBV against women. This includes providing support service and supervisor of GBV promoting gender-sensitive laws and policies, and conducting awareness-raising campaigns to challenge attitudes that condone violence against women. And last one, women's practical participation. Another practical feminism approach in the Philippines is to promote women's political participation. This includes encouraging women to run for political office, advocating for gender quotas, and supportive women's organizations that promote women's practical empowerment. Practical feminism in the Philippines involves a range of efforts and actions aimed to promoting gender inequality and empowering women. These initiatives include promoting women economic empowerment, gender-sensitive women's health and reproductive rights, gender-based violence prevention, and women political participation. That's all. Thank you.